George McCleary joins me here today. You could find him at a couple websites, titlefrauddefender.com and squatterdefender.com. You might recognize him from his viral video of where he stole a house in Portland, I think it was.
That's right, sir.
Could you talk? Let's start there. First of all, was this an idea? Did you mean for it to go viral like it did? Or was this just kind of by accident and you had kind of a neat little video here?
I had some idea that it was going to strike a nerve because if you make a video saying like, "Hey, did you know that people are squatting and it's really bad?" People are going to be interested in that maybe a little bit. But if you say like, "I stole a house," and that's a much more catchy title, and that's how I lead it into the video. And then I just basically do like a step by step as if I actually did it. And to this day, there's actually still people that think I stole a house. And it's funny, I was on ChatGPT the other day and I said, "Hey, did George McCleary really steal a house? Whatever became of that guy?" And GPT is like, "No, he didn't really steal a house." And since then, he's launched these two companies to help real estate investors and homeowners to prevent squatters and title fraud. So, yeah, the truth is out there.
But you mentioned that one of the oddities here is that it didn't generate as much traction to your websites as you had hoped because people just kept reposting it?
Yeah, what happened was I posted the video to TikTok initially, and half an hour later, I look at my phone and it explodes with notifications. Like I've never seen anything like that. And so I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm going viral." And then like 20 minutes later, boom, it's taken down off of TikTok. I'm like, "Wow, okay, that's in lying out like a lamb." And so I was like, "All right, maybe I'll just post it to Meta and see how it goes." Same thing happened, except for it got left up for like 3 days and then it got taken down again. So, but within that 3 days, that was enough for it to, go viral, but not anywhere near as viral as what happened on X. And what happened there is somebody downloaded it from TikTok, uploaded it to their account, and there's a couple guys that did that have like 1 million followers, and that's what really blew it up to the tens of millions of views is the reposting on X. So on Meta I had like a million views or something like that. So it did well, but in the 3 days before it got taken down. But X is where it went completely bonkers.
Do you have that posted on X now? Like, so somebody can watch that?
Yes, it's on my X profile. That's what is it, McCleary RE. It's it's on there, but by the time I got around to upload it on X, and I started contacting the guys saying, "Hey, can you link back to me? That's my video." And they were like, most of the time they're like, "What?" And then they just wouldn't respond. And so sometimes they would link it back. So it led to me getting some more people following me on X, but not nearly as many as I hoped would. But what it did do is it got me to be the squatter guy. And that's what landed me like on the Dr. Phil show on News Nation, Fox News called. Like it was a whole slew of media that happened afterwards. Going viral has a lot of facets to it, in addition to just getting a lot of views on a video.
How was those experiences being on those programs?
I loved it. Dr. Phil was a really cool guy. He flew me down there, put me up in a nice hotel, gave me a nice boxed lunch. I had hair and makeup, which I hadn't had for many years since, you're on TV, and I was wearing a suit and they gave me a tie. And so and all the news appearances, those were basically just over Zoom, and it was just very sleek and professional. And I interviewed well. I think I did well. So, and it really helped kind of launch my two companies that I was doing in the wake of this, because what it made me realize is this is a really underserved market. People are getting squatters and getting title frauded, and there's really like nowhere to turn, no official resources. So all the media really helped with that.
Yeah, it seems like, depending on the state you live in, some of the process to get squatters removed can be an absolute nightmare. Can you talk a little bit about like real world examples of some of the things you've seen?
Absolutely. So basically, what squatters are doing is they're pretending to be a tenant. And if you can put one over on law enforcement and make them think that, yes, you are a legitimate tenant, or at least cast enough of a shadow of a doubt to where they don't just haul you out of the house. Because if you've got a guy in a house, he's got furniture, he's got kids running around, or he's got a roommate, there's a pretty decent chance that this guy could be a tenant. And we've just got a he said, she said situation on their hands. So that's why law enforcement isn't yanking them out. So then it's up to the courts at that point, or at least most people think that's the best way to go, is to go through the court system. And getting tenants out in a lot of places, especially like blue states or blue municipalities, is a real big pain. It takes weeks, months, years to get anywhere close to getting them out, especially in areas like Oregon and California, Washington. I've heard just so many nightmarish scenarios. And even if you're in a red state, that doesn't stop the squatters from pulling one over on law enforcement and making them think that they are a legitimate tenant. And law enforcement, no matter what state you're in, they're not going to risk their necks by hauling somebody out of their house and arresting them unless they've got a really good idea that you are indeed a squatter. And that's really hard to prove on the spot.
And unfortunately, we had a kind of a small bout of it here in my market where we had scammers taking possession of a house in some way, running ads, and then tricking people into
Renting.
fake leases and renting them out. So,
Yeah, that's absolutely a problem as well. There's people occupying the places as squatters. There's people that are not even occupying, but just gaining access and then leasing it to unsuspecting lessers. This is how I learned about title fraud. There's people that are putting their names on the deeds with a fraudulent deed that they file with the county because it's really easy to forge a deed. And after they forge the deed, they occupy the house. And so then when the cops show up, they say, "This is me. I'm the owner of record. As you can see, officer, like this is my house." And it makes the squatting all that much more difficult and insidious.
so you've been in real estate investing for quite some time, right?
Oh yeah, up through this point, I still am an active real estate investor. I'm developing some flex space. I'm developing some apartments. I'm not doing as many house flips anymore. I used to do a ton of those, and that I got a little burned out on. Great business, and it made some good money. But right now, I'm focusing on bigger things while growing this little side quest I'm on with squatters and title fraud.
So what's the journey there to get to these two other businesses that you have?
So basically, what happened was after I went viral, after everything had calmed down, which took about 2 or 3 weeks before I started like not getting 100 text messages and emails a day. After that started calming down, I'm thinking like, okay, like how can I turn this into an opportunity? What can I do with this? At that point, I'd started speaking with people that had been victimized as either squatter victims or victims of title fraud or, contractors that had scammed them. I just heard from so many people because in the comments of the videos after it would get reposted or people just contacting me directly, I'm pretty easy to find. They would say, "Hey, this happened to me too. That's crazy. Like, can you give me some advice or whatever?" And I took all of those calls and some patterns started emerging. And I started getting really good at figuring out how people were removing their squatters and also how people were preventing them from happening in the first place. So that's how I created the Squatter Defender course, just this book of knowledge that I was very, very uniquely positioned on obtaining because nationwide there's no like central guy or repository for this type of information. So suddenly I was a lightning rod for it. And plus, with all my existing real estate knowledge, it was a very logical pivot. And then with the title fraud, that same thing happened. I heard about people that were victims of the crime and started talking to them. And people were literally crying on the phone to me, talking about how they'd lost everything. I'm like, holy smokes, this is a really big problem and nobody's talking about it. What can I do to fix this? And so that's when I had this title fraud defender software created. And ever since then, over the past several months, I've been on a mission to help investors and property owners protect themselves because these are the ship sinkers. These are the things that ruin you. People talk about tenants and toilets, but these are the ones that can just turn you upside down from day one.
Well, let's start with the squatters. Could you give me a couple examples of what are some of the biggest mistakes we could do in dealing with squatters?
So, one of the things that I noticed right off the bat is there sure are a lot of cowboys in the comments when people start posting about squatters, especially with my videos. They'd say, "Well, I would just, get my 12 gauge and solve this problem real quick." So, there are real world scenarios where people have done that exact thing, which is either holding your squatter at gunpoint or what they're suggesting is essentially murdering their squatters. In rational civil society, you can't do that. If someone breaks into your house, yeah, you can blow them away, but you can't go into somebody's house that they've unlawfully occupied and shoot them. And people have done that, and there are people sitting in jail right now. And there's also people that are 6 feet underground that have either unalived their squatters or the squatters have killed them. And so that's the biggest mistake you can do is resorting to violence from the jump. Like, these are very desperate people. If somebody's desperate enough to occupy one of your units and run that risk, as much as that risk is mitigated by antiquated laws in different cities, you're still dealing with very desperate people, and you don't want to come after them with a gun. It's probably not going to end well, and you're putting yourself at risk.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things. Everybody's kind of blowhard and super confrontational when they're anonymous behind a keyboard.
Yeah, a lot of keyboard warriors out there. And that's actually really rare that people actually in real life have done that, has gone and kicked in the door and brandished a gun at their squatters. So thankfully, it is pretty rare. But on the other hand, there is other methods that involved direct confrontation that actually do work really well. And then there's other ones that are just really unconventional. And I get into that in the Squatter Defender course and what I call the unconventional methods, where these are the ones that are off book and I can't, legally recommend them. But what I do is I say, here's what happened, and here's what I've heard a lot of people have done. And here's how it turned out for them, and you make your own call.
Well, if let's say you're dealing with the squatter, you got this, you just discovered this. What is the number one thing you should do?
So the first thing that you do if you have a squatter is first you say, get the heck out of here. You can't let the squatter know that they haven't been undiscovered or they've got a free lunch, because that is the best case scenario for a squatter, is having occupation of a house or any kind of property, that is, and not being known about them. That's it. So first thing you do is you confront them. You say, "Get the heck out of here," and you size them up, because a lot of times they're going to pretend to have a fake lease, or they're going to say that they're on title or something like that. So then of course the first thing you do is you call the police. The police are going to show up and they're going to use their discretion to decide whether they're going to pull this person out of the house and arrest them. But here's the thing: possession, as they say, is 9/10 of the law, and it's a whole lot easier to put somebody into a house than it is to pull somebody out. And like I was saying before, law enforcement is not going to put their necks on the line to yank somebody out of the house if they got any kind of reasonable doubt that maybe this person could have a legitimate claim to the property. So those are the first two things you want to do. You basically want to size up the situation and call the police. When people call me up and be like, "Hey, I got a squatter," I always ask them, those are the first two things, like, "Hey, have you met him? And have you called the police?" And those are the first two things that you do before you have like an actual real problem that involves next steps that you need to take in order to fix the situation.
I had also have heard of career squatters where they just move from one property to the next. They might get kicked out of one and they're just moving into the next one. Have you run into that as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's some famous ones that are like downright notorious. They'll squat in like $1 million neighborhoods, and they actually have like legitimate good jobs. But instead of having like a $12,000 mortgage payment, they just occupy these properties. They know what to say and do to keep law enforcement off their backs, to clog up the system legally, and to continue to occupy them under the assumption that the owner is going to go through the court system. And so if you're in a place like Seattle or Portland or LA and you got a squatter and you hire a lawyer and you go through the court system, they're going to to compel you, the lawyer is, to either do an ejectment or an eviction. And ejectment usually is a long docket process. It takes even longer. So they're going to be like, "Yo, dude, you just got to evict this guy. It's going to take less time. Like, what do you want to do? You want to get him out, right? So let's just evict him." But that is like a tacit admission, like, this guy's a tenant. He actually has a legitimate claim to be there. In any of those cities, or really in a lot of cities nationwide, red or blue, it's going to take a really long time. Then these people know exactly how to exploit the legal system to stay there as long as humanly possible.
Just to remind everybody, head over to the website there, title frauddefender.com and squatterdefender.com. I'm going to have clickable links in the show notes.
Yes, that's right. We were chatting before the show, and Real Dealcast is a promo code that you can enter either on squatterdefender.com or titlefrauddefender.com, and that'll get you 20% off of your total purchase. So if you purchase a long-term subscription to Title Fraud Defender, that can save you big bucks.
Title Fraud Defender and Squatter Defender. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a quick like and subscribe. So let's move on to the Title Fraud Defender. Give
Yeah.
us kind of a rundown of what happens there.
So title fraud is something that I'd never even heard about until I went viral. And then I heard about a guy that was occupying a place that he had himself put himself on title with a fraudulent deed. And I thought to myself, that's crazy. But because of my real estate background, I've signed a bunch of these deeds before. All it is grantor, grantee, legal description, the property address or whatever, and then just the notary stamp. And then you take it down to the county and poof, like that's how deeds transfer. Of course that works because it's so easy to forge a deed and not every deed goes through escrow. So I heard about people that were forging deeds and either impersonating the owner and then selling the property, or in slightly more insidious cases, because the end buyer will have an escrow company and they'll notify the buyer. And the buyer, if he's being impersonated, they'll be like, wait, no, I'm not selling this place. But people will steal somebody's identity, put a property into that name of the stolen identity, and open a bank account and then sell the property to an end buyer. And it'll go through escrow and everything. But escrow will be notifying the fake person whose identity got stolen. Yeah, this is you. Are you guys selling, are you selling this house? And he's like, oh yeah, of course I am. The wire goes into that person's fake bank account and then they wire it to Hong Kong or wherever they are. And they make off with the entirety of a homeowner's home equity. And it's just insane.
Yeah, that's crazy. You know, especially with all of the security in place regarding every facet of our financial. This seems to be kind of a blind spot.
It's absolutely a blind spot because what escrow companies are really big on is wire fraud. And that's where fraudsters will impersonate them and say, hey, here's your wire instructions. Countless people have been wire frauded for hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars or more. And you hear about that all the time, but you don't hear about the title fraud quite so much. But these days, if you talk to your escrow officer, they're probably going to tell you it's just recently gotten on their radar. And the thing is, they can't do a whole lot about it because they're the escrow officer. They're the neutral third party that are governing these transactions, but it's actually the county that's recording the deeds and responsible for the chain of title. So therefore, all they can really do, the escrow company, is to just do checks and balances to the best of their abilities. But what are they going to do? Are they going to call back the owner from like two ownerships ago? If you'd already transferred it with a fraudulent deed, then the amount of legwork that they could have to potentially do, it increases their workload. And as of now, I don't really know a whole lot of escrow officers that are really reaching that far back to like just check on every little last thing. And plus, these people are closing, 5 transactions a day. So, yeah, it's not a reasonable expectation to expect them to, come up with security measures for something that really doesn't have anything inherently in place.
So, what does your service do to help with this?
So what we do at Title Fraud Defender is we do title monitoring. So if somebody wants to steal your title, Jack, then they're going to create a fake deed, deeding it from Jack to Bob the stealer, Bob the crook. After the title is transferred, the city is going to post on their website on the title that it's no longer Jack's names. It's in Bob's name. If that happens, you're not notified. The city is not obligated to let you know that your title has changed into somebody else's name. They presume that, it was you that actually did it. So what Title Fraud Defender does is it monitors your title and every single day it checks to make sure that your name is still on title. And if something changes, immediately you get a phone call, you get an email, you're like, hey, Jack, did you sell this property? Because if you didn't, you've been title frauded. And what that prevents is it prevents your equity from being stolen. Because if they take out loans against your property or they sell your property, that is not covered by the Alta owners. Take a look at your title insurance policy. If you've got an Alta owners policy, and chances are you've got that or some kind of version of it, fraud and impersonation after the policy date is not covered. And that's where the damage is. It's stealing your home equity. So with title monitoring courtesy of Title Fraud Defender, you don't have to worry about that. We've got your back. And if it does get stolen, we tell you what to do to fix it.
What is a couple of the first steps you have to do to fix that?
So big old long list of people to call. For you got to call like the district attorney, the police, the title company. You got to make a claim on your title insurance, even if you realize you probably don't have coverage. You basically got to sound the alarms so that when this person tries to sell the property or take out loans against it, any logical end buyer is going to go through escrow and have title insurance. And at that point, they're going to see that the escrow officer is going to see, like, okay, hey, something's wrong here. We can't actually do this. And the jig is up. You're not going to lose your home equity. Switch it back. They won't do that. You actually have to do a legal action. And that's called an action to quiet title. And the action to quiet title puts title back into your name, and everything at that point is totally fine. So as long as you know about it quickly, it's sort of like with the squatters. If you know about them soon enough, you've got, you're not going to get in quite as much hot water. Whereas if these people have time, they have time to steal your equity, take out loans, and really screw you over really badly. But if you know about it right away, then you're all set. And it's just like it's a few bucks a month per door.
Going back to the squatters and this, you're dealing with fraudsters in both avenues. Is there anything like red flags or anything that stands out to making you a bigger target than your next door neighbor?
Yeah, I'd say probably the biggest thing in squatting is having your property be vacant and looking like it's vacant. If you've got overgrown grass, mail that's piled up, like door hangers that are still there a week later, all the squatters are trying to do is have a place where they're not going to be detected for as long as possible so they can set themselves up and occupy the place without incident for as long as possible. So with squatters, that's the best thing you can do is make sure that you're actually stopping by there. Your property manager is stopping by there. I have a whole list of squatter prevention tips in the Squatter Defender course. It's squatter prevention, detection, and ejection is all the course materials in there. And there's a whole bunch of other things you can do, but the first one is make your place look like somebody lives in it. And with title fraud, there's not a whole lot else you can do besides just get a title monitoring service. You could pay for home title lock, that's 20 bucks a month, or Title Fraud Defender does the same thing with state of the art technology, and I think it starts at 5 bucks a month.
Okay. Well, George, this has been a fantastic and interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Is there a concept or a thought that we should have tried to cover before we dive in?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. I would say that people sometimes accuse me that, hey, man, you're scaring people. You're going to make people not want to invest in real estate. Don't let this keep you away from being a real estate investor. It's still a great way to make money. I still am actively buying real estate, and we'll always do that because it's a great vehicle to make money. And all you got to do is just watch your back, and not just watch your back from the little things, but also the big things that people don't talk about as much. People love to share wins, but you don't hear quite as often from the people that got scammed and don't really love to talk about it because it's traumatic, man. Like it really sucks. So, yeah, don't let this keep you away from buying real estate.
And just to remind everybody, these will be clickable links in the show notes, titlefrauddefender.com and squatterdefender.com. Use the Real Deal Cast as your promo code and save a little money there. Well, if you're ready, we'll jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode.
Awesome. Let's do it.
What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
Gee, I'd say the biggest one is that real estate always goes up. It doesn't always go up. If you click on a house on Zillow and look at the Zestimate, sometimes it'll be flat just for years and years and years. And then, if inflation spikes or interest rates go low, but don't buy real estate with the expectation that it's going to be going up forever because in a lot of places it just doesn't. It's better to hold assets as a hedge against inflation, and especially lately, that's a really big thing. But there has to be something that makes it go up besides inflation, whether it's job growth, population growth. There has to be less of it than the demand is to be there. And if you look at places in Detroit that are selling for $1, it's because people have continued to flee that city. And there's some places where it's gone up, but it's in the places where people have actually moved to. So unless you've got something driving it, real estate doesn't always go up, and don't lie to yourself on that.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Buy Bitcoin? I bought Bitcoin when I was in, I think it was like 2011, and I was selling for $13 at the time. Bitcoin, I went and bought some stuff with it, and I think it ended up being like $2 million by today's standards or something like that. It's just because I thought it was fun. If I had held on to all that I'd bought back then yeah, I'd be living on an island somewhere. That would be nice. And I actually do still have some of that from that original transaction, which I'm probably never going to sell because my basis is 13. But yeah, I'd say, hey man, buy a bunch of Bitcoin.
What book would you recommend?
What I really enjoy is, everybody's got their real estate books that they love and self-help books. What I've really enjoyed lately is learning from people that have had very interesting lives, like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Phil Knight, people that have accomplished amazing things from humble beginnings and gone on to tell a really interesting story. Because we're all authoring our own lives from day one, and we all want to have an interesting story. And so, learning from guys like that is something I've really enjoyed lately. So, I'm going to go with Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Okay. And what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact to you or your business?
So by far the biggest thing, and I'm sure you get a lot of people saying this, is AI, but specifically making your own GPTs and your own projects within ChatGPT. It sounds like it's a little bit more advanced, but all it really is creating like a little silo for knowledge on one topic in particular. So I've got one that's just strategy for my business. And I talk to this thing all the time, like on car rides. I sit at my desk and I type it, and it's basically like a free flowing conversation with, and I've set it up to be a high level business strategist that's helping me craft my next move in business. I've got other GPTs that I've set up for my business that helps people do things in like our CRM. And so I've got all of this knowledge kind of siloed into different GPTs. And what it enables me to do is share with my team members and people that I know who need to know, like, okay, how do we respond to this type of text message from an agent or something like that? All you got to do is ask the GPT that's got, thousands of exchanges with like hundreds of agents on our property acquisitions team, and know immediately how to respond to it. So not just AI, not just ChatGPT, but making your own GPTs and siloing that information within the GPT that you build.
Well, I'm going to take this as a moment to call out. I have a couple set up there for people to use. So for what George is talking about there,
Is that so?
that's
What do they
so
do?
siloed. And it helps people do return on investment calculations and a few other things, but head over there and just give it a try.
Do that.
I really appreciate your time here, George. This has been fantastic. One last time, it is titlefrauddefender.com and squatterdefender.com. Those will be clickable links in the show notes, as well as the coupon code RealDealCast. Thank you so much, George.
Jack, this has been great. I really appreciate it.